streaming 2.0, which is a strategy less on scale, but trying to capitalize more on this idea of superfans who's willing to pay more than just that basic form of subscription fee. So, a lot of this mood-based playlists are flattening out culture because it's encouraging passive listening.
Welcome to Tech in the Arts, the podcast series hosted by the Arts Management and Technology Lab at Carnegie Mellon University. We keep you updated on news and current developments in all things arts, tech, and media. My name is Ian Hawthorne, and I'm the lead researcher here at AMT Lab. I'm joined today by Jinghong Gong, our podcast producer. In this episode, we'll chat about what we've been following in the news this month, with a special focus on the music industry and streaming 2.0.
Hi, Ian. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm great. Well, I'm excited to jump into the recent topics about streaming.
Yeah, I'm absolutely excited for this episode. I think that being in more of the arts field, I don't get to talk a lot about the contemporary music industry, but it's so interesting because I am addicted to music. I know everybody at this moment seems to be addicted to music.
Right.
So it's awesome to kind of lift the hood and see what's happening underneath, with the whole music economy, how artists get paid. That seems to be changing nowadays pretty dramatically, as well as some scandals happening with the way Spotify is maybe promoting artists nowadays.
And I mean, it's been, Spotify been under the spotlight and, under a lot of criticism. But yeah.
So do you want to talk a little bit about what Spotify has been up to?
Yeah, this is something came up actually. It was in a discussion, Spotify with Universal Music Group, that they strike a deal on this idea of streaming 2.0, which is a strategy less on scale, which Spotify has done amazingly, capturing so much of the market share. But it's to trying to segment their subscription markets and trying to capitalize more on this idea of superfans who's willing to pay more than just that basic form of subscription fee. Like, for example, right now, Spotify has two tiers. One is the ad-supported version, which you don't pay anything, but you just have to suffer through a lot of advertisements between songs.
I know the feeling. I was there for about 6 months when I first downloaded it, and I could not
6
stand
months?
it.
That's awesome.
I had some self-control, but I was like, I have to give in at some point.
Yeah.
I need my playlists. I need my freedom.
Yeah, so that accounts for a decent amount of revenue indeed from the ad-supported version, but most subscribers, most people are subscriber, which pays, I believe, this price. It's I'm a student.
I've also been a student for most of my time.
So I only know the $5.99. So
yeah.
There's the student tier and the normal tier, and also there's the family tier. But those are more basic tiers, and it doesn't really differentiate between, if there's a higher quality version or not. Everyone kind of pays the same price for basically unlimited amount of music, like everything on Spotify you get access to, and even podcasts. So.
Yeah, so they're all basically getting the same product, just at slightly different prices, based on if you're a student, if you're a family, if you're an individual.
Yep.
But are you saying now that with the sort of superfan strategy, they're trying to give you a elevated product at a different price point? Indeed,
and this is something interesting. I don't know if you know that most streaming platform nowadays offers lossless audio. I don't know if you're a big audiophile or not.
I wish I was. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so lossless audio is this concept of basically higher fidelity audio, because through streaming platforms, these audio files are being streamed through your laptop or your phone, and then it goes into your listening device. There's a good chunk of information is lost, depending on the file format. Spotify is known to not provide lossless audio.
Oh, really?
It hasn't added lossless audio yet.
Okay.
Which offers them a chance to bump up a tier, offer
just
another tier.
Better audio quality.
Better audio quality. But for example, other platforms like Apple Music or Tidal, they've been incorporating lossless audio, hi-fi audio that a lot of the music fans are loving that feature, but Spotify have yet to add that. So this is an opportunity for them to say, hey, we have a superior tier of quality of music, and now you got to pay more.
Yeah, it's like you get to listen to the same music but better now.
Exactly.
Interesting. Now I was reading about the superfan strategy too, and it seemed like there were some other tactics that are being floated around out there for trying to engage fans in person in a variety of places, or having merch tie-ins, various things like that. Could you talk a little more about that?
Yeah, so I think recently, I don't know. Actually, I don't know which platform you use.
I am all on Spotify,
That's awesome.
which
So,
is very annoying because my partner is all on Apple Music. So like I can't send her playlists or anything, but
right.
I am addicted to Spotify.
So indeed, Spotify is really really convenient. The user interface and everything is about the live events and merch, like the in-person events. I think I don't know if you saw like Spotify has been pushing like, hey, you've been listening to this artist and they're coming, they're playing a show, near you, and
I've seen those.
that's that connection to live events. And I think with this new proposed streaming 2.0 model, there are suggestions about, hey, if we have a more premium subscription model, can some of these fans have early access to tickets or pre-sales, that, or even priority seatings?
Interesting.
So that's kind of give them more incentive to pay a higher price.
Yeah. And I could see that working really well too with the whole trying to juice live events more. Because I know that at least in other fields of the arts, that's always been a struggle post-COVID is getting people out of the house, quite simply, like getting to live concerts, live events. Do you think that could help in the long run?
It would definitely help. Like honestly, a lot of the concert I mean, we are very busy. Like,
Yeah, for sure. The two of us
daily-
aren't going anywhere for a while.
But
For normal people.
for no, I mean, also like if people are doing jobs and they're not keeping tabs of all these concerts and live events, there's limited channels. Like, I mean, you have Instagram and whatnot, but people are not, it really depends on the artist and their team and if their marketing can really push that concert to you directly. But it will be way more targeted if they already know you listen to these artists and through that streaming platform you use and say, hey, here's an artist you listen to a lot and they're coming.
Yeah. So it's kind of, they're taking more of a curatorial path now, where it's not just, here's all the artists ever, find yours and build your playlists and whatever. But now it's like, here's your taste. We can help curate these opportunities for you, even if you're not following their tour schedule or if you didn't know they dropped merch, here's their t-shirts or something.
Exactly. And I think like there's so much music out there and there's not everyone is listening to Beyonce. I mean, everyone is listening
at this point
is listening to Beyonce, but there's also so much other talents that are emerging and people are following those. But the big marketing channels are going to be occupied by Beyonce, Kendrick, for example, and all those big artists. And the smaller artists, they will probably have a better chance promoting or reaching their audience through some sort of platform like this, more targeted, more niche.
Would you say part of the issue is not that everybody isn't listening to Beyonce, but that everybody's listening to Beyonce and Kendrick and all the independent artists? Like everybody's listening to everyone almost.
Yeah. And exactly. I think that's kind of Spotify's goal to begin with. They're trying to, let you stay on the platform as long as possible and discover more music. And I think, honestly, the algorithm has pushed a lot of exciting new artists and new sounds to me. And I've been enjoying that too. But there are also criticisms.
Glad you brought that up because there was a book that was published recently called Mood Machine by Liz Pelly, and it was just published this January. And she actually criticizes Spotify as a streaming platform for a variety of reasons. She mentions this term, the flattening of music culture, which I definitely want to get into because I have a sense of what that means, but I'm not an aficionado in that. So I'd love your take on what flattening music culture looks like, or I guess sounds like in this instance. And also some of the abuses that have been brought up about Spotify's use of the algorithm, how it pushes artists. I believe there's a program called Discovery Mode.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's drawn a lot of criticism behind the scenes. Some callbacks to the 1950s radio scandals. Why don't you start there? Just explain what's happening with that.
I think I'll start with flattening music culture. I think recently there was another book, I can't recall the name exactly, but it's also talks about how in this digital world, so many stuff are dictated by algorithms. And the way algorithm flattens the culture is that, in a sense, you keep seeing the same stuff over and over again because the algorithm determines that, hey, you like this thing, and it just keeps feeding you the same thing. It's beneficial when it's pushing you, like when it's making you happy. But when you feel the drought of like, hey, I've already listened to these things, or like it's not really pushing new content to me. I don't know how is your experience using Spotify, but I think actually 2 months ago I really had this feeling of I was trying to go to like radio, and I click radio and everything is just already saved.
Oh no.
And like there's mood playlist, and I click them open, it's just all songs that I already heard before. And I was kind of disappointed in a sense that, hey, Spotify used to give me a lot of surprises, and I was really excited about those, but the algorithm is not doing its thing
Yeah.
at
So
that time.
would you say it's kind of like content for content's sake is when it starts to feel a little dry in comparison, or just you're not seeing anything new anymore?
I think it's the idea of I'm not seeing anything new anymore. Like maybe I am a huge music fan. Like that's like that's the premise. Like
Excellent.
I listen to music every single day. Like it's like too many hours of the day. And so like big artists, when there's new stuff that's dropped, I already heard it 1,000 times off like Instagram, like all these shorts and all these, marketing campaigns. And so I'm kind of less excited about them, like per se.
Yeah.
Or I just want to be that cool niche guy.
Yeah.
I listen to the niche artists.
It's like when you have so many artists and songs you're running through, it's like you're interacting with so many subcultures that are becoming increasingly sort of peripheral to the mainstream. And so it's always, I would imagine, this question of like, what's new, what's exciting, and that becomes harder and harder to get or to find, right?
That was kind of my experience, like my understanding of how flattening the music culture is. But in the book, actually, I think a point that Pelly brought up is that these playlists, a lot of this mood-based playlists are flattening out culture because it's encouraging this action of passive listening. You're not actively engaging with the music content. Like you're not listening to it. Like I'm a big fan of Bjork. And her song is like, oh, these arrangements and vocal and ideas and all that. You're not actively engaging with that. It's encouraging people to just have it on. And so there's lo-fi, like study playlists. A lot of people use this as a background for them to do other daily activities. And in that sense, it's not anything new. It's just a background thing. And it's just like a mood enhancer. Or even, there's playlists for sleep. You just play something for you to sleep, which is, it has its functions, but that is being pushed to the forefront of Spotify. There's a lot of like lo-fi playlists and all this stuff that Pelly, she's feeling like this is flattening the culture too. Like it's prioritizing these playlists that people are more willing to just leave it on than, an active listening session. Maybe you would just listen through it once.
Interesting. That's really interesting. I must profess I'm guilty of passive listening. I think it seems to be a lot of people are becoming guilty of passive listening just because it's so easy to access music nowadays.
Yeah.
I definitely resonate with the idea of putting on a playlist and then interacting with an artist very briefly because one or two of their songs might be on the playlist, right? But then you don't dive into that artist as a whole. I think there's been studies out there that show like passive listening, their songs get played, but it doesn't lead to anyone becoming a fan at a higher rate,
Indeed.
right?
Yeah.
And so I can see that just kind of getting lost in the background. And then also, do you think there's a problem with people aiming to get onto these playlists and so tailoring their music to that? Like they know what the lo-fi mood music is looking for, so they know how to produce it. Kind of like I've heard that people, have done a lot of TikTok songs where they'll make music where like the song is kind of average, but they tailor it around the like 10-second hook that they know will blow up for like a month on TikTok.
Exactly. So that is a very, very good point. So people will try to align their music style to whatever the algorithm's trying to push. And, I think the important thing about like, why are these things pushed? Because when you passively listen to them, there's more royalties being generated.
Exactly.
So that's the whole goal, that, the more time you spend on it, the more play counts or streams that you get, the more royalty split you get.
And I was going to ask about that because I know we talked about, passive listening doesn't necessarily lead to fans, but if it does lead to your songs getting played, isn't that ultimately still good for the artist? Or do you think it flattens the culture because they're just making their music to get that one play or to get noticed at all?
The idea of music culture to progress, I don't know if everything got more mediocre and lo-fi and not really, not really expressing, not really bringing new ideas or, I don't want to generalize because I know and I believe there's so many aspiring and inspiring artists out there that are making exciting art. But there's also a lot of people who come into this and want to just, hey, let's play with the algorithm.
Yeah.
And,
Let's play the game.
let's play the game.
Yeah. So we're not going to generalize and say that Spotify has ruined music.
No.
But we will say that Spotify has introduced a system that more and more people are discovering ways to exploit or maybe just survive in. Like, let's talk about this discovery mode for a bit, because I was reading about what Spotify did with discovery mode, and I thought it was fascinating because on the one hand, it's like utilizing their algorithmic system as a black box to say, like, hey, if you give up some royalties, we'll adjust various A's and B's in your algorithm to maybe give you a better chance of being noticed. But and so they're using it as a sort of like obfuscation technique so that it can't be seen as like a direct bribe. But at the same time, it's like, oh, they're getting more notice. There's like a direct correlation, right? So can you shed some more light on how that works?
It is.
What's happening there?
Yeah, so in the book, I think Liz Pelly, she did amazing investigations around this and just find out that there's a lot of artists that were offered this deal from like discovery mode that if you were willing to give up a higher cut of your royalty paycheck, you will be pushed more by the algorithm. And of course, a lot of these independent artists, actually, especially the independent ones, who has less marketing channels outside of just, maybe their personal Instagram or like paid promotion on other platforms, they kind of have to rely on algorithm push. So a lot of them will say, hey, I need to opt in this. I can take a pay cut. And if that's means I have a better chance of getting discovered, but this is a chance thing,
Yeah.
And some artists took it. And I believe I read this report that internally in Spotify, they thought maybe the goal would be 30% of the independent artists that would take this pay cut, that this royalty, cut. 50%.
Wow.
Of independent did.
Oh my God.
And so they actually, made so much money because many of these aspiring, artists and independent artists, especially the middle class ones who are not getting millions of streams, but they're still getting a decent chunk of the royalty check, they all opt in.
See, and I want to say that's surprising, but it's also sadly not surprising, right? Because I read in this article by The Guardian sort of criticizing this pay-to-play system, right? That Spotify defends this as democratizing. It's different from, they've been compared to the payola scandal in the 50s, which we can get into a little more with the radio industry.
Yeah.
But that was more of the studios just paying radio stations to play their music. It was kind of a direct, under the table boost our popularity thing.
Yeah.
But what Spotify says is, we're not asking them for money that they don't have. We're just withholding money that they would be making, which is ironic because it's from the artists who are trying to still get started in the first place. Like you said, half of these smaller sort of independent artists are taking these deals, sacrificing their initial pay to get noticed more, which I'd imagine, raises their popularity, or at least they hope it raises their popularity. But then all the royalties are getting sacrificed, right? So there's this kind of cycle of, I don't want to use the word exploitation, but exploitation.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the worst part is now 50% of the people did it.
Yeah.
And the rest of 50% will feel like, hey, now they are getting pushed more by the discovery mode, and everyone gotta do that pay cut.
And it's like even if I'm not on discovery, how do you compete with the other 50% who are taking the pay cut but getting noticed more than you now. And so now you're not, even though you're not taking that discount on the royalties, you're still not getting noticed. So you're kind of still paying that cost, right?
Yeah. And now you're more inclined. And now what if maybe 100% or well, not say 100%, 80% of the people are taking that cut. And now then that royalty split is already, the balance is getting tipped over slowly and slowly. Who knows? And then there will be a new tier of discovery mode. If you take even more cut, we have a new, playlist or some sort of thing.
It's kind of like, it's so interesting because it's like having an economics background, I saw the kind of superfan strategies as a form of what we call in economics price discrimination, right? Where it's basically, this happens all over the place with like store coupons or discounts for things. If someone's willing to pay a higher price to do something, how do you get them to pay that higher price? Or if someone is willing to do something or buy something, but at a lower price, how do you get them in, right? And so I see that at play a lot in the superfan strategy in terms of Spotify getting people onto the platform. But I also am starting to see it here with the way they're selling their product to their artists, where it's like, how do we extract the most money from them just so that they have the right to be played on our platform? Because we are one of the few mega platforms for finding fans, right? And so it's interesting how sophisticated they can get in terms of keeping revenue that they otherwise might give out to these artists. And then, like you said, I wouldn't be surprised if in a year or two they have different tiers of like very well established, royalty withholdings for different discovery, ladders.
Yeah.
Unless they get sued, which is what happened with the radio stations, right?
I think it's difficult. I think it's difficult to enforce, even with the radio station. We know you can pay the radio now. You can. There's a lot of practices in the industry that you still do. Like you still pay radios to boost your songs or play your stuff. It's like connection based, but most of the time it's still monetary incentive.
Okay.
But for the Spotify part, I think the main issue is that more and more independent artists are getting taken advantage of. Because when you see the bigger label artists, they have their other negotiations. These big labels, Universal, Sony, and Warner, they get to negotiate with streaming platforms because these artists that they have are more established, and there's a more predictable kind of a payout for these artists. So they might be able to negotiate a way better deal than all of these independent artists. So it's really about serving the music industry. I think in this book too, it really says Spotify came out as this thing of helping discovery. It was appealing to the niche market of people trying to discover more music and more independent scenes, but in the end it's serving the big music corporations.
That's interesting.
Industry.
I didn't even think about it from that angle, but you're right, where the big labels have so much power, have so much leverage. I think about when Kendrick dropped GNX, right? He did like barely any promotion for that. If you're a big artist like that, you can drop something like that. And I was eating it up all that morning. I was like, oh my God.
Same.
And it's like, but if you're an independent artist and you drop your version of GNX, nobody's going to notice, right? And so you got to put it on discovery mode. And then it's like, well, I'm getting noticed, but I'm not getting paid. And so it's interesting because I see the like benevolence in the system where it's like, oh, we're a flooded platform. You're a small artist. How can we help you get noticed, right? Because without this, you might be treading water.
Yeah.
And I see it. I'm going to kind of play devil's advocate here, and I'm interested in your opinion on this. But let's say someone is sort of trying to justify this discovery mode strategy. And they're like, well, how is it any different from if you're starting a band? Going around to local bars or local joints and saying, hey, let us play live for free. We'll give you a cut of our tips or whatever, because we just want to get noticed.
Yeah.
A lot of people withhold revenue in the beginning because they need to build a following, for instance. And so is this similar to that sort of mindset, or is there something a little more problematic here because of the concentration of power?
I think about this, like two ways. From a perspective of an artist, of course, you want to be able to do this, like pursue art and, trying to build. You're making a product
Yeah.
on these platforms, and there's that pressure of, hey, I need to make this a sustainable career, or keep making these music, and so you would want to play the game.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I'm an up and coming band, yeah, I would. Like I would play for free.
Yeah.
If it shows that, hey, if I can get more people to listen to my music.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even Kendrick's Halftime was free.
Yeah.
But well, that's okay. That's a lot.
That's for part 2.
That's for part 2. But from the artist's point of view,
mm-hmm.
you're kind of screwed.
Yeah.
You're
And
kind of screwed.
is
in
that
sense.
any different than how it's always been? I feel
no.
sadly,
Sadly,
no.
but I think a good thing is we have a lot of, these educational resources that artists are now learn to, better understand deals. Like, I want to own my own copy of music. I want to own the masters. Like, these labels can give me a huge advance of the, a big deal, but I want I want to own that stuff.
Yeah.
So it's not once I'm out of this deal, I don't own that piece of music that is my means of survival,
Yeah, so you think that a lot of increases in legal literacy among artists is
Exactly.
really important for navigating this landscape.
Exactly.
And I totally 100% agree with that. I think that, people have clearly learned from examples like Taylor Swift or any of the other big artists who've, run into these kind of master issues, these licensing issues.
Yeah.
Do you see examples of smaller artists being more proactive on that front at all?
I think one of my friends in the meme program, entertainment industry management, shout out. He worked in the segment like Latin American music a lot, and he was telling me a lot of these big reggaeton artists are actually independent,
Oh, really?
and which is a a trend nowadays. Like these labels have great, they have the marketing channels, they have they hold the power at those gates.
Yeah.
But these artists are saying, hey, we only want to sign a publishing deal with you. We still want to own every piece of our music. And so that's becoming the trend.
And they're succeeding at that.
They're
still
succeeding at
finding
that.
success.
Yeah. And which is great. And I think that's becoming the trend too, because these labels are not really building an artist. They're just
They're just marketing the artists.
Yeah, they're just marketing the artists. Hey, I saw this person blow up on TikTok, or or their song blew up, and hey, let's give you a publishing deal. We'll just get a slice of the cake and we push you.
Yeah. No, I can definitely see them sort of hovering over to that role. Because when you think about it, isn't that sort of the utopian vision of something like a Spotify or a SoundCloud or YouTube?
Yeah.
I remember it's like everybody wanted to be Justin Bieber. When it's like back in the golden age of YouTube, you can just post some music videos of you singing covers and then you'll get noticed and blow up, because that's like the democratizing wonder of the internet.
Yeah.
And the same thing with Spotify, doesn't everybody want to just be able to drop a GNX and then find a following, find a market, build a community on these platforms?
Yeah.
But so much of it from our discussion, it makes you realize how the governance of these platforms matters. And not just that they're there to use, but then once you're on it, how do you succeed in it? How do you connect with fans? How's that mediated by whatever algorithm they're using?
Yeah.
But then also in music, the labels and this whole industrial side of that too.
Yes. So I think, yeah, exactly. That is the concern, and we need to think about that. And I was, we were talking about the artist side, and for the industry side, there's so much music out.
Oh yeah.
There's so much.
I couldn't imagine managing any of that.
Yeah. So there's
insane.
so much music, and so I think it is indeed with the coming of streaming 2.0, I think it's valid, because I do think that this is I'm getting way too good of a deal.
Yeah.
I'm not paying anything for music right now, $6 ish, and I get unlimited amount of streaming music. I think that's an amazing deal.
It's awesome. I definitely don't think any consumer is complaining about this at the moment.
Yeah.
But I think you raise a good point where, like we've been saying, doesn't that contribute to this sort of cycle of flattening of ease of access. More people get on the platform, which means more artists want on the platform, which means there's more competition for being noticed.
Yeah.
You need to get on that lo-fi playlist to get your lo-fi tracks listened to. And this is something, we're dealing with in my world too, which is more of like the traditional arts and museum space where, everybody's assuming that art should be free. Yeah. And even from the provider end of things, as an arts manager, we all want our museums to be free. I'm sure there's not a museum director out there who wouldn't love to have their art museum be free to the people. It's just a matter of affording it. And I think the music industry is a really interesting case study where it's like we're approaching that, where it's at least, if not free, affordable to the masses, but at what cost? Who's sacrificing their buck to make that happen? And I think it's important to notice and to pay attention to that.
Exactly. And from our live music class, our professor, Liz Berlin, she was part of this legendary band Rusted Roots.
Oh, really?
Yes.
What?
She's part of
What?
She's part of Rusted Roots.
The Send Me On My Way people?
Yes, exactly.
Oh my God.
I'm taking class from her. It's exciting. We went to Mrs. Small's, which she owns the venue.
Oh, really?
Yes, it's amazing.
My God.
It was super fun. We should go for
a
show sometime.
I need to meet her.
Yes, it's amazing. We'll have her on the podcast.
Oh, definitely.
Yes, we'll have her on the podcast.
I knew Rusted Root was from Pittsburgh. I didn't know.
She's teaching here.
I didn't know the connection was this deep, though.
Yes, exactly. But something she said, this new streaming thing, because she came from that, like she's been touring for 30 years, and she saw all those changes in the industry and said, she told us that the streaming thing is neat. Like she gets a royalty check, every now and then. It's nice, but it's probably not going to pay rent, even though she has a huge song that got, everyone knows.
Massive
song.
Ice Age deals.
Ice Age deal. And so, and she's saying that, streaming world, now having your music on streaming platform is just a publicity. Publicity.
Yeah.
To sell merch. So you will have your music, and the real sustainable income comes from selling your vinyls, selling your CDs, your T-shirts, your posters, your zines, and all that.
That's interesting. It's like, I think I'm immediately thinking of Instagram, where it's like if you're a content creator, you can create a following on your platform, but then so much of what influencers are right now is not just creating content for content. It's like you've created content, you have an audience. Now, what do you sell through that content? Or how do you connect them to, your line of merchandise or your personal brand that has other offerings? So it's interesting to think of Spotify becoming more of less of an end goal and more of a curatorial platform of just, here's where we listen to the music to try and find our new favorite band.
Yeah.
To then buy their T-shirts and go to their concerts.
Yeah. So
that's interesting.
I think that's also kind of what Streaming 2.0 is trying to solve. I think this model is less about getting the audience to listen to a new piece of music, but getting the fan to connect with an artist first.
Yeah.
And become that, continuous support for these artists.
Because clearly getting people to listen to music is not a problem anymore.
No.
People can listen to any and all music all the time. It's, how do you drill in? How do you actually become a fan? I think it'd be super interesting to actually just take a survey of people out there where it's like, how many bands would you consider yourself actually a fan of?
Right.
How many artists do you follow versus could you name the artists you listen to today is an interesting question that I think we could only ask in the 21st century.
Yeah.
I know for sure that there's some artists on my playlist, even just my songs that I'm like, I could not name you the band name or the song title.
Right.
I just know I've heard it on loop every now and then. If you played me the song, I would be able to sing along, which is kind of wild hearing that come out of my mouth.
Well, no, that's just a product of this era.
Environment, exactly. No shame.
Yeah, no. But I think, these discussion on streaming platforms, how these new changes are coming, and, I think these are some exciting changes. I do want to see artists getting paid more, even though at the same time, of course, the industry will be richer. But if that means, more artists may be able to have a better chance of survival, hey, I'm all for it. I'm down to see what Streaming 2.0 looks like. And of course, I think it's also a great timing of this Pally's book.
Yes.
With this new changes, hey, let's keep in mind some of these practices might be problematic, and how artists can educate themselves. I think something you talked about, the literacy and what are these legalities. It will help. It will help to build a healthier music industry,
Healthier market.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if the pie gets bigger, it's really no problem as long as you get more slices out of it, right? The only problem is if the pie gets bigger and Spotify's slice gets proportionally bigger and bigger as it goes.
Yeah.
So absolutely, I think this is really exciting, really interesting stuff happening in the music world.
Yeah.
As always, I feel like it's never not interesting in the land of music.
Yeah.
And super important to keep in mind just the ethics, the labor relations of artists, getting them their buck. But also, if you come across an artist today in your playlist and you haven't listened to anything beyond their one song, I dare you, go to their page on Spotify, listen to an album. That's my challenge for you today.
Yeah.
Let's see how many more super fans we can build.
If they have an album.
That is a good point. There have been too many artists I've found that are just like, oh, you have like 4 EPs.
Yeah. Or
which
singles.
is like fine. I'll listen to them.
But yeah, go support artists.
Support your artists. Amped Lab wants you to support your artists.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, Jinghong, it's been wonderful having you on today. This has been a really insightful conversation.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you so much. Well, I'll talk to you soon.
Will do.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Tech in the Arts, the podcast series of the Arts Management and Technology Laboratory. If you found this episode informative, educational, or inspirational, be sure to check out our other episodes and share with the arts or technology aficionados in your life. Check out our website at ampslab.org, that's amt-lab.org, or you can email us at info@ampslab.org. Follow us on Instagram at Tech in the Arts or Facebook and LinkedIn at Arts Management and Technology Lab. Our season runs from September through May, so feel free to follow us on your preferred podcast app. Thanks for listening.